It's your one-stop shop for great wrestling. It's the WrestleCopia Podcast Network. Ray Russell brings a host of great shows right to your device. There's the Wrestling Memory Grenade, Regional Wrestling, the Wrestling Stoop with Bob Roop, the Amazing Puro Academy Show, Retro Wrestling Review with Gene Jackson, Dave Dynasty's long-running hit, Wrestling Nostalgia, Monday Warfare, Raw vs. Nitro, the hilarious Other Ship podcast, and a whole lot more. Great shows and great guests, but where do you find all this stuff? Really simple. Try logging on to WrestleCopia.com. As I like to say, it's your one-stop shop for great wrestling memories. Hi, everybody, and welcome back to the Outdated Wrestling Hour. On this edition, we look back at the greatest promotions in the mind's eye of Bob Smith, Steve Gennarelli, and John McAdam. I remember my favorite promotion was 1985. New Coke. Oh, it was delicious. I loved it so much. It was so tangy. It had a really different flavor. I couldn't wait for it to come out. I've seen all those promotions. And then I drank some and are you nuts? It's the Outdated Wrestling Hour. It's the best wrestling promotions. And as far as I'm concerned, New Coke tasted like rutabagas. It's the Outdated Wrestling Hour. What do you know? New Coke tasted great with a Hog's Head cheese sandwich. As we sit here in the New York City regional area, Joe Puccio and I are hearing the rain hitting the windows. It is pouring outside, so let's make it a little bit sunnier by bringing you the dulcet tones of Long Island's own Joe Puccio, better known as Leon. Who is Leon? He's got Leon in his chat box. Who? Leon?
What a nice intro. Leon, that's in tribute to Mr. Leon White. I was thinking about Vader today because of Danielle Fishel having a Vader shirt at the Survivor Series PLE this past week. That got me thinking, and why not Leon?
I was on Facebook at the time on my phone, and I'm looking at this. I watched the whole thing, by the way, the whole PLE, and I typed in, seeing her in the Vader shirt was the best part of the whole pay-per-view, and it was.
It was cool.
It was.
Yeah, you don't expect that, but you do know that you remember Vader was on the Boy Meets World episode. Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Are you kidding? Everybody saw that episode.
A cool little tribute, you know?
Not too bad, no. That was the best thing about that show. It was just too much. That's my review of Survivor. Too much.
There was so much happening, like you said. I mean, there were friggin' cage matches, war games, whatever, yet they were kind of like, I don't want to say boring. It's probably not the right word, but it was just like, too much going on that you kind of just were distracted by everything. I don't know. It was left me wanting something else.
Yeah. You know what I would have preferred? Traditional Survivor Series matches.
I know. Everybody says that. I don't know why they don't do that.
I don't know why that's not enough.
But I would love to see that. Those original 5-on-5 matches.
Yeah. Too many gimmicks, too many weapons, too much nonsense, really. Too much taking the cues from the indies.
Yeah.
I insist in the old days, the indies took the cues from the majors. The majors did not take their cues from the indies. The indies would try to look more major league. And now the major leagues, in quotes, are trying to look more indie.
Yeah, it's kind of flipped a little bit. You're right.
It has. That's the way they act anyway. I'd rather just see a good indie, to be honest with you. You know, just 5 matches, 6 matches, good action. No music, no fireworks, no nothing. Just show me the ring, show me the athletes.
This show was 4 matches, 3 hours, 3.5 hours of the whole.
I know. It was ponderous. Absolutely ponderous. And again, I say this all the time. The object of these matches is no longer to win or pin somebody. It's to obliterate your opponent.
Yeah.
And that's getting old too. I mean, everybody's laying in the middle of the ring like a bomb went off, because it basically did. they all got hit with everything but the kitchen sink, and they're all laying there in various forms of either bleeding or having bones bent backwards. And I'm like, it's too much. It's too much. It's like my favorite war games of all time is still the one where Larry Zbyszko hit Bobby Eaton with the rope turnbuckle. And
Okay.
he's aiming for Sting, but he hit Bobby Eaton, and Bobby Eaton eventually lost to Sting like 5 minutes later.
Okay.
So that one goes way back. That's when it was the Dangerous Alliance on one side versus Sting's
Oh,
Raiders or whatever it was.
yeah.
So I don't know. And that's the one where Medusa climbed the cage. And everybody was impressed just by that.
I remembered. I don't remember the Medusa part. I do remember the. Now that you mentioned the Dangerous Alliance in that match, it's a little murky, but yeah, I remember
They
it.
all blend. There's the problem with the gimmick matches. If you go back to the last 4, let's say WWE cage events, can you remember anything that happened? It's all a blur.
Exactly, that's the problem. It's too much. And the funniest spot, I know we're not talking about Survivor Series today, but the funniest spot that I do remember at this past week's show was the women's war games when Io Sky, now every year, I guess she's got to do like this crazy spot with a garbage can where she like puts the puts the garbage can over her and then she like flips in the ring at her opponents, which is fine. They all have to, there's a little gimmick. But she did it, and it took her a while to get up there and get her footing. And all the heel women, they all like were on the ground of the mat, and they all get up, and they just they just so unnaturally, they just kind of all come together. They stand together, and then they just look up and they just wait. It was just so long before she actually did this flip with a trash can, taking them out.
I'll put it on my wish list for 2026. Band that jumps off of high things. Ban them. And they all have their arms in the air before the leap even
I
takes
know.
place.
I hear you.
It starts with an F, folks. Anyway, we have a little breaking news for you guys. Beepity 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 beep. They used to do that in the news programs. Remember that? Beepity 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 beep. Here's some breaking news. It's 5 days old by the time you hear it. Actually, yeah, 4 days old. The long venerated started in 2002. TNA, Total Nonstop Action, has got a new TV pack for next year. They're going to be on, of all things, because it sounds funny, AMC, which used to be American Movie Classics, but this has nothing to do with movies. It'll be a 2-hour block, and that's really all we know at this point, except for I think it's a big deal because people will have a way to see it now at TNA. I was one of those people in the beginning when I heard out that the Jarretts were behind the original TNA. I bought those early pay-per-views and kind of stuck with it for about a year in the beginning through the good and bad, even though I have to admit it was mostly bad in that first year. They were feeling their way around, too much bad comedy and all this other stuff. I was a TNA supporter early on because I was looking for that alternative. Now I'm still looking for an alternative, and I'm excited over the fact that TNA is going to be on a station that more and more people can watch. What do you think, Joe Puccio?
So what's interesting about AMC, I just want to mention the evolution of that channel. Because if you think about it, that channel, when it started out, they showed classic movies, black and white, movies from the 50s, the 60s. That's literally what it was. And I just remember this growing up because my parents loved the channel. That was their era. They loved watching those movies, and that's what they wanted to see. And then at some point, it just changed to the new classics. And then it became, the 80s and the 90s, and you had movies like, E.T. and Star Wars and even in the 90s, Shawshank Redemption and things like that. And don't get me wrong, these are classic movies, but it's a completely different generation of classics. And now look where we are in 2025, or I should say 2026, we're going to have TNA wrestling on AMC American Movie Classics, which is really strange. Maybe they should change the initials of that channel. I've been a supporter of TNA as well since they started. Those first few years, that was really must-see wrestling. I mean, there was quite a buzz about it, if you remember. I mean, the quality of the matches were great. You had guys like AJ Styles and Christopher Daniels and a lot of the early tag teams, America's Most Wanted and those guys. So yeah, I was a huge fan of the first few years. I still watch them today, but it's a little bit more difficult because my cable station doesn't have Access TV as one of its channels. So now I have to sort of find it online the next day. You can usually find a copy, but this is going to be a game changer because now that it's on AMC, I get this in my cable. I'm sure you do. I know most people probably have that in their packages, whatever they subscribe to. So now, even if you can't watch it that night, DVR it, watch it over the weekend. I think it's going to be a 9:00 start. Right now it does 8:00. It's going to be like a 9 p.m. start on Thursday nights, which is fine.
I didn't even read that much. I just knew it was coming. When TNA was bad, it was real bad. And it had so many permutations, so many people running it, so many different people behind the scenes, from Billy Corgan to Dixie Cardia. I mean,
Mhm.
it's just so many different things that really weren't all that great. But their innovations, especially early on, like you took it, were great. Like the X Division,
Yep.
another name for light heavyweights. But you know what? That allowed a lot of good wrestlers to shine when they took on people their own weight division. The women's division, they really pushed women's wrestling long before the other two did, or the other three companies of the time. The Beautiful People and Gail Kim and Taryn Terrell, and just go down the list of everybody who wrestled there. There's some really good stars that came in and out of there. And of course, you remember the hexagonal ring they used to have?
Yeah, I was gonna mention that. I don't know. People that has its detractors. One thing I will say is I know a lot of the wrestlers have gone on record as saying they did not like it because I guess it made it a little bit more difficult to sort of run the ropes, and it makes sense, right? Because if you're used to working in a four-sided ring for your whole career, that's how you were trained, and then you have to sort of learn the ins and outs. So that's completely makes sense. But as a fan, I always liked it. I don't know. How did you feel? I always thought it was something different. It just looked kind of
I was neutral. I didn't
yeah,
dislike it. I didn't like it. I just saw it. It didn't phase me all that much. But I understand what it's like from a professional wrestler standpoint because, running the ropes is a timing thing.
yeah.
And when you're used to working in the same size ring for 5 years, and then you go to an indie and the ring is smaller or in some cases bigger, it'll throw you off like crazy. I've heard wrestlers talk about that a lot. Or the ropes are too tight or they're too loose. I want to do a show. Nobody's going to listen to this, but I've always wanted to do a show about rings. The ring. What's in it? Why are there different sizes? What about the ropes? How come we used to see, remember those old NWA, they looked like rubber ropes? Do you remember those? They weren't really
Yeah.
rubber, they were just coated with rubber.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Or the old AWA ropes, or the ropes in Memphis that were red and they never changed all they did was change the tape on them, and you could tell they were old. They'd fray right on television.
Right.
You know? So, I don't know if it's interesting though, but I'd like to know more about the rings themselves.
Hey, I bet that would be the first ever wrestling podcast on the wrestling ring by itself.
I'm going out of business soon, aren't I? But anyway, no, we're kind of excited about not the return of TNA, but I guess the graduation onto a major cable network again. So we're looking forward to it. And I always root for the alternatives not to take cues from the big two. I want them to be their own thing, you know. And TNA's done some awful, awful angles. I mean,
Oh
they
yeah.
had two murder angles on TNA wrestling. All right. So I hope they're more grounded now. I know they've got a nice little talent base there now. Let's see what happens.
Well, and don't forget they still have their affiliation with WWE. So I mean they're still I don't know how deep it runs, but they're still affiliated. They still do some talent switch and here and there. I guess it was Dolph Ziggler that did something. Somebody, and Joe Henry. Although I know I believe he's officially switching to WWE. But I know they do that here and there, so that can only help them, I would think.
But here's the thing, I'm reading all different I hate the wrestling internet. I hate it. I can't stand it. Just today, I'm reading official press releases about this, and then other people on sites I've never heard of reporting, "Oh, this ends their WWE affiliation, la-di-da-di-da." I'm reading all this today. We recorded this on Tuesday, by the way. So, I take it all with a grain of salt. I'll wait and see what happens. I hate to say this, gang. I still only trust the Wrestling Observer for this kind of thing.
You get no argument for no argument from me
No.
there. Yeah.
No, everybody complains about Dave Meltzer, but he's the only one. If
No,
you read the news section, it's factual.
exactly.
Gosh, everything else, I hate to say this, but if anybody out there has a wrestling news site and it shows, well, you know what, The Ringer is good too, but The Ringer is not really a prescient news breaking site. They cover topics. They're not. Here's what happened yesterday. The Ringer is amazing, but as far the wrestling section is, but geez, get on the stick, guys. Clickbait and I mean no, seriously, it's just
No.
it's frustrating. I've had my own stuff misquoted on the news sites. Give me a break.
Yeah, there's way it's gotten out of hand now. I mean, I won't even say the name of the site. I worked for a website a couple of years ago for about a year or two, and it was complete garbage. Basically, what I was doing was scouring the internet. This is what they wanted me to do. During your shift, you're gonna click around, go to different news sites, and take whatever news you could find, post it onto our site, and change the words around so that it looks like it's your own news item. And yeah, there was a little bit more to it, but that was the gist of it. And I was like, you got to be kidding me. I had no idea that this is what I was actually kind of signing on to. And I did it for a little while. And as I was doing it, I'm like, what the hell am I doing here? I mean, this is ridiculous. This is what passes as a news site now.
And at 75% of them are like that as far as the ones I've looked at. And then when you do take the clickbait and you hit that button, let's say it's a link from Facebook, you hit that button and you start to read something, and here come the ads populating faster than you can click
Oh,
off
yeah.
of them.
Yeah,
On the
yeah.
left side, the right side, below. There's a flash over your screen. You have to figure out how to get that thing off there before you can read anything else. It ain't
Exactly.
fun. It's not fun or informative. I'd rather not know what's going on than go through that. That's how bad those sites are. I don't know what to say. They're terrible.
I'm still old school. I still, even though I don't get it in the mail anymore, I once a week read the Observer. I have my subscription, read it. He's still got great history stories, goes into the Hall of Fame, gives great bios on old timers, obituaries when it happens. And
Right.
it's just good. I mean, it's really good reading. And it's a lot too.
It's still the weekly gold standard, and I do not care about his match rating system or anything he has to say about anything that's going on currently. If he can give me the rock solid news about something or somebody leaving a promotion, this guy was thinking about coming here, but he's going to this other company because blah, blah, blah. I love that stuff. It's just the bee's knees.
For
Best
sure.
reporter in the history of wrestling. I don't care what anybody says.
Agreed.
I mean, somebody show me a better reporter, and a more timely one too. And that doesn't mean he does all the reporting himself, but he's the one that helps fashion it into a website and a newsletter.
And I was just going to make that point that something that's really helped Dave a lot in the last several years is his getting affiliated with Brian Alvarez. Alvarez, I think, has a little bit more, sort of technical knowledge, a little bit more go-to. I think he's good with the internet age, so to speak, now that they do their podcast and they do their Wrestling Observer Weekly every week. So I know Dave is a little bit behind on that stuff. So I think hooking up with Alvarez, I think they're a good match, good chemistry together. And I know he helps him a lot with the newsletter as well. So I think that's also a really, really good move on Dave's part.
Okay, now we're going to move on, and we're going to talk a little bit about our guests on the show. It's Steve Gennarelli and John McAdam from the Stick to Wrestling podcast. And they're going to talk about our favorite territories. And we're going to do the 10-point rating system. We're picking 10 that we found to be our favorites. Now, I want to explain something. This doesn't mean that these territories are the best or the most financially successful or anything in that regard. To me, when I made my list of 10 territories, it was the ones not only that established themselves as quality wrestling, but also had kind of an influence in every other territory that was going on. Like, WWF had influence on NWA, and NWA had influence on the Southern territories, and on it went. One of the ones I picked was NWA Hollywood, which was the old Blassie Tolos promotion, the Olympic Auditorium. I was the only one of the three of us that chose that.
Yeah.
But I felt that they were very historic. I think they were really the precursor to the hardcore movement years later. Everybody looks back to Blassie Tolos for, oh my God, they're both bleeding out, that type of thing. There's a lot of reasons for it. And not to mention that they introduced Roddy Piper to the world, and Chavo Guerrero, the original Chavo, and all that other stuff. And I thought they were very influential. Neither of the other two guys had. But there are no rights and no wrongs. This, again, is really the basis of our show. It's a fun look back at stuff we really enjoyed. That's what it's all about. That's what these charts are about. So, Joe, I want to ask you, since you're sitting there so patiently as I spout here, you were weaned on the WWF in the 80s. What's the next thing you discovered that you were really into? And it could be anything, even a small indie. What do you think?
Like you said, I mean, most of my exposure came later on or through tape trading, as I've talked about in the past, because I was pretty big into that for a few years there, at the height of it. Obviously, everybody buying their first VCRs, and it became like a real toy, for so many of us. They were able to watch not just wrestling, but anything, things that you couldn't see previously. So I did watch some of the stuff that came before me that maybe I wasn't a fan for. But the one company I'll mention first is Smoky Mountain, which was really like a Tennessee-based territory, even though it was after the WWF's expansion, because Smoky Mountain was in the 90s, the early 90s. So it's a little bit different than the territories, I guess, that are going to be primarily the topics of the discussion. But I never like to forget that company because it was just such a gritty little company that could, and obviously because of Jim Cornette and, his vision, but there was so much good stuff on there that people, if they've never seen they should really seek out, and it's very easy to get tapes and footage of this stuff. A couple of things I'm thinking of just off the top of my head. Yeah, that great Rock and Roll Express versus Heavenly Bodies feud in that promotion. And that was, again, at a time that people figured, the Rock and Roll Express, aren't they sort of past their prime at that point? You know what? They had some really good matches. Hell, Ricky Morton is still wrestling today, isn't he? But I mean, or he was as of a few years ago.
Sort of, yeah.
Yeah. They had some great matches. I know they did a Loser Leaves Town match in 94 when the Heavenly Bodies left. Remember they did a Tracy Smothers, Chris Candido ladder match. I believe that was just a couple of months or a couple of weeks after WrestleMania that year, which of course had the classic Razor Ramon, Shawn Michaels ladder match that year. So obviously they were taking that from WWF, but it doesn't matter. I remember watching it. It was a really good match. They did a great job. Jim Cornette's promos were just as good as anything I'd seen him do in Mid-South or WCW. Don't sleep on his promos in Mid-South. And one other person, Tammy Sitt. Do you remember she was in Smoky Mountain? And do you remember that angle that she had that gimmick that she had where she was like a heel who was idolizing Hillary Clinton at the time? And it goes to show you in that part of the country that was, you were considered to be a heel if you were idolizing somebody like Clinton. And I remember they did that. I always thought that was pretty smart. And that was a pretty clever gimmick to saddle her with. But yeah, I don't know. Smoky Mountain, I always loved it.
A lot of young talent. I remember the debut of the tag team of Chris Jericho and Lance Storm.
Oh, that's right.
Right? A
Yep.
lot of young people. I hate to mention Brewster Bedlam, but he was another person that Cornette pushed a lot.
Yep.
Brian Lee, who went on to be the fake Undertaker, among
Fake
other
Undertaker,
things.
that's right.
Right. I mean, it was a good mix of older talent, like the Armstrongs and their sons, and they had Kevin Sullivan and Mark Lewin came in after a while, and a couple of Japanese stars. It just, you go down the list, Wild-Eyed Southern Boy types and all that. They didn't call it that. I forget what the tag team name was at that point. It was good. It was all action. The fans were into it. Crowds looked very good on television. It was a good show. Bob Caudle and Dutch Mantel. Come on now.
That's right.
And who could forget the Gangsters?
Yeah, and that's the thing. I think it was at a very interesting time too in wrestling because it came out. This was before, I guess it was sort of before ECW, but it was almost like a precursor in a way. I mean, of course they were completely different promotions, but the thing about Smoky Mountain was I always felt like it kind of mixed old school and new because it wasn't your parents' wrestling promotion. It wasn't like really just rest holds and anything like that. There was a lot of action, but it still kept the old style of wrestling. You still can get a really good technical match, and they used to be really heavy on promos. So I always felt it was like a really nice mix of wrestling.
I thought it was like a mix between Memphis and Crockett.
Yeah.
The two feels together like peanut butter and jelly.
Yeah.
Or a nice moon pie. Or maybe chocolate Carvel. I don't know.
But
I
really
can
loved
see it. No, I enjoyed it too. And thanks to our tape trading at the PWI days, I used to get my tape in every week and watch Smoky Mountain. It was part of the Pedicino block, which was brilliant. It was good, man. I think I was still with the magazines when they decided to close up shop, and I was upset because I'll tell you what, at the magazines, it's like every Monday I'd come in. Well, this one's closing, that one's closing.
Mm-hmm.
It was rough. I was Mr. Indies, and I all of a sudden had less indies to cover, and I didn't like that. I really didn't like it. Anybody else? Any other territories after that? The 605 show and all that stuff?
Yeah. I mean, I would say, for the earlier territories, before the actual WWF expansion, I guess my favorite, and I know we've talked about this before, but I would say Dallas. I would say World Class is probably the one that I gravitate towards the most. World Class, man. I mean, to me, that might be my favorite of all the territories before the expansion. The Von Erichs, I don't think there's ever been, that's one of the top feuds of all time, the Von Erichs and the Freebirds. We've talked before about the Kerry Von Erich, Ric Flair world title change at Texas Stadium. Even from a production standpoint that we've talked about it, I mean, they were the first promotion, I think, to use multiple handheld cameras. They use pre-taped vignettes outside of the ring. These are things that other promotions really weren't doing at the time. And the one skit that always comes to mind when I talk about World Class that I still love is the whole Jimmy Garvin and Sunshine stuff with David Von Erich when Jimmy Garvin had to be his valet for a day in '83, and he was doing stuff like cleaning horse stables and washing David's dog and doing all these tasks that, you know, he didn't want to do. Like stuff like that, I think was just for that time, it was a little bit ahead of its time, you know, and I think they had a great mix of great wrestling, great angles, great production. It felt real. There was a great mix of talent. And that would probably be the one that I most fondly remember of the pre-expansion days.
I can't blame you for any way you felt about that stuff. Those were the days when you had your choices. Like I said, there was one particular apartment I lived in. I think it was in Saugerties, New York. I actually rented a house back then. And I had my choice of 8 wrestling programs every week, not including the USA Network stuff like Primetime Wrestling and all those things. So it was really, I didn't know how lucky I had it. Because it was upstate and they got the downstate stations, like from New York.
Yeah.
So I had the upstate stations, the downstate, and some syndicated stations. And they would throw anything on. We had WGN from Chicago and stuff like that, and TBS, of course, for the NWA. We had it all. Now we have it all. We don't feel as good about it. Well, anyway, I'm so glad you're here this week. Well, before we go, I want to discuss Queen of the Ring. And I want to discuss with all you people out there, too. Because I know a lot of you people who wanted to see it and have had access to it. It is finally available for streaming, but not free streaming on HBO or Apple or something like that. I know it came out earlier this year, way earlier this year, and it had a short run in theaters twice and then disappeared completely. Like one day, poof, it was gone after about 5 weeks. Then it was showing up to buy on a couple of the pay apps that you would use, to buy a movie for $20. But now it's available on, I think, Amazon Prime and Apple Plus at least. And it's like $4 or $5 to rent it now. I am going to rent it and look at it finally because I've been waiting to see it. I don't know if it came down for a Christmas price or something, but it's very, very affordable now. And I want to check it out. Joe, you going to do that too?
I'll definitely do it, and we can talk about it on the show for sure.
And I know it's going to sound like, why are you doing it so late? It came out in April or so, something I understand that. Fact is, we didn't have much access to it. We waited. We were waiting for it to go HBO route, but I don't see any signs of that happening. I just researched the web. I see it listed no place. So we're going to finally get around to it. I want to see it. I want to see Jim Cornette as the NWA commissioner. I want to see Toni Storm as an old-time wrestler, though she already is, really, when you think about it. God, I love her. I will take Toni Storm 10 out of 10 and Twice on Sunday. I'm telling you, she's awesome. I don't care. She entertains me like very few people do these days. What do you think?
I agree. I love Storm. I think that I was a little hesitant when they started that whole gimmick with her. It's been a while now, but there's nobody that goes in harder with a gimmick than she does. And she makes it work because I'm sure there's some people that they could have given that gimmick to that it might have been a little cheesy or might not work, but she does something about her. She's just perfect at it. It's really it's a home run.
Well, Dana Brooke, who just retired, I guess, for health reasons in Impact or TNA, whatever they call it this week, she became Ash by Elegance, which I thought was a very similar kind of a hoity-toity type image thing like that. But nobody can pull it off like Toni Storm. Toni Storm is one of a kind. The WWE did not know what it had. They obviously didn't have any foresight with her. I don't know why, but my gosh, she sells tickets.
Yeah, I mean, and I can say from a live standpoint, being in some of the AEW shows over the past year or so, she gets a reaction for sure. I mean, not everybody does, and I know there's a lot of different factors to look at, but when her music comes on and she's walking to the ring, she's one of the louder pops that you'll hear in that company. So she does a great job. She's awesome.
I keep referring back to an old interview she did with Renee in the back, and she goes, "And watch out for the shoe." And she walks off and throws the shoe at Renee, and Renee's like, "Oh, come on now." It was just, it's so old school. I laugh every time she comes on this, I laugh at something she says. She'll say something completely outrageous, and how she gets away with half of it, I have no idea. But she's so funny. And good in the ring, and one of the most original, out-of-nowhere characters I've seen in maybe 20 years. Seriously. Who saw that coming? Who would even predict that?
I know.
What was it? She got conked in the head. All of a sudden, she's an old-school movie star or something like that, right? Right? It was just...
Yeah.
Wow. It's so good.
And then for a while, she went back to her original Toni Storm gimmick, and people were like, oh, I guess it's over. But as it turns out, it was her supposedly acting because, in essence, she's supposed to be
She's
an
the
actress,
finest actress. Yes.
Yeah, so she was like, "Oh, I was just acting," and she kind of made it work. So it's definitely one of the better gimmicks out there.
So old school, that's new school. That's all I'll say. Joe Puccio is the proprietor of GenerationXWire.com, the entertainment website, unlike any other one that's out there. What's your newest thing on there, Joe?
The latest we have wrestling wise would still be, I think the last wrestling thing we did was the Brian Solomon interview on the Gorilla Monsoon book. So that's still up there. Definitely people, please check that out. And more importantly, buy the Gorilla Monsoon book by Brian Solomon, which is awesome. Non-wrestling, we have a review of the new Aerosmith EP that was just released a week or two ago. So it's about 5 songs, but as any Aerosmith fans know, it's pretty big news that they actually put out new music in 2025 with another artist named Youngblood. So that's a review we have.
There you go. Joe's looking at me like, what's wrong with you? In any event, we're gonna go. We got a lot to talk about as Steve Gennarelli, John McAdam, and myself go over our favorite territories from the territory days. Strap it on. You better get yourself like an Ovaltine or something because this one is going to take some time, but it's a real good one. And we will be right back to start the festivities. Count to 9.5. I have to admit something. I never get too cocky as a podcaster. All right. I never do. And here's why. Because the top 2 shows I have done on the Outdated Wrestling Hour featured these same 2 guests. So I think it's these same 2 guests that are the reason why they're the most popular shows in the history of this podcast. I am proud to welcome back the team from Sick to Wrestling with John McAdam. First of all, of course, we have John McAdam. Hello, John.
How are you, Bob?
Fair to middling, I guess. Everything's fine. Congratulations on your shows. The podcast, I'm one of those people who kind of checks the ratings once a week. The show's doing great, and I want to congratulate everybody over there. It's well-deserved. I still continue to say you have the gold standard nostalgia podcast. You really do.
Well, thank you very much. I mean, it is the number 1 wrestling podcast out there, the most listened to in its own, kind of category. Like, I can't compete with Steve Austin. I can't compete with, Jim Ross or anything like that. So basically, if you eliminate all the podcasts that are more popular than Stick to Wrestling, it's number 1.
There you go. You got to be number 1, right?
Yeah.
And his frequent co-host and just a wonderful human being who is suffering from a little bit of a cold right now, but he still bowled his way out of bed to come and say hello. It's Steve Gennarelli. Steve, welcome back.
It's great to be back with you, Bob, and with John as well. And yeah, I mean, John's found the magic formula for the podcast. We have Lou there to help us along, and Brian Last, of course. And I think it is one of the very best podcasts out there. And we have a very interesting topic that the 3 of us have been working on under about territories. And Bob, take it away.
Yeah. Did you come up with this one or was it me? I think you again, Steve, came up with this concept.
Okay.
When I sat there to do it, this will be a snap. I just need 10. But then I went through every one I could remember and, researched just a little bit. This wasn't easy. This one was probably the hardest of the list shows, even though there's only 10. Because in the United States of America, which is, by the way, what we're basing these lists on, this is the U.S., and they're all until about the year 1984 is what we're counting here. Right, gentlemen? This is what we came up with.
Yes.
And my gosh, the territories ruled back in the day. Nobody even considered it because people didn't look at the business and have knowledge of the business the way today's fans do. John, would you agree with that?
I do agree, and it's funny because I actually had a tough time coming up with number 10. There were 9 that I absolutely really liked, and number 10 was a little bit difficult, but I got number 10. So I'm glad that you were excluding territories that you kind of couldn't wedge in there. I didn't have to do that. I'd find number 10.
There you go. That's good to hear. Steve, how tough was this for you?
Well, it was tough, and I actually have a couple of honorable mentions. I don't know if you guys felt that way. John, did you have one of those?
Not really.
Okay.
Not really.
Wow. He's locked in.
All right. Well, I since I'm one of the visitors here, I'll give you my honorable mentions first, and then we can get to number 10 after we hear Bob's honorable mentions. But I actually have 3 honorable mentions. I have, because when I was doing it, I was thinking about North America. So I did include the Stampede promotion because of all their contributions of wrestlers that came through there and got their seasoning. Many well-known names, from Superstar Billy Graham to Junkyard Dog, Jake the Snake Roberts, Gorilla Monsoon. I mean, and all the great wrestlers that they produced that were in-house, like the Chris Benoit's, the Owen Hart's, Bret Hart. I mean, great wrestlers. So I wanted to acknowledge them. I also wanted to acknowledge the Amarillo promotion, which is like one of the great forgotten promotions. I know Tony Richards, who's a big supporter of Stick to Wrestling, and he has his own thing going with Pro Wrestling Time Tunnel. He is writing a book on Dory Funk Sr. in the start of that promotion, which is going to be a great book. But the Amarillo promotion, you got to think of it twofold. They had all those wrestlers that came through West Texas State, all those great wrestlers, Tito Santana, Ted DiBiase, Bruiser Brody, Dusty Rhodes, Bobby Duncombe. I mean, there's tons of them, all that came through the Amarillo promotion. And also, Dory and Terry were booking the talent to All Japan. You got to give them credit for that, too. So they played a very important role. And then John just had Frank Culbertson on our show talking about the Portland promotion, which had great longevity from the 60s up until the early 90s. And I just wanted to acknowledge them for surviving in the midst of all the national expansion and stuff. They lasted pretty long to last until the early 90s. So those are my honorable mentions.
I'll be quick with mine. I have Stampede Wrestling, right?
Okay.
Now, people forget about Stampede. It wasn't always Stu Hart. There were other promoters that were involved with something called Stampede Wrestling up there.
Okay.
I believe his was called Calgary Stampede as a name of the promotion. But I put them on. Also, the Paphos ICW, which is fondly remembered, and gave us Randy Savage. That alone is, that alone is worth having. And then just a tip of the cap, to Joe Blanchard's Southwest Championship Wrestling was the one that was on the USA Network for about, I don't know, a year or two. And it was short, but it was good. And they did draw. So, until the mighty gobbler of the WWF came and swallowed everything. So I just gave them a tip of the cap here. They're not on the 10 list.
Oh, awesome.
I have something to say about Stampede Wrestling, and that is that the in-ring quality of the matches were always really good. However, the announcing was bottom of the barrel. I'm sorry.
Ed Whalen.
Yeah, Ed Whalen was is probably the worst announcer of all time, for real. And the booking was so bad. We're talking about, it felt like whoever was booking to make themselves laugh, like to have a guy named Biff Wellington or a faction called Karachi Vice. So that's why it did, despite being really good in the ring. And they always made the baby faces look inept, not just bad, but inept. So I that's the problem I always had with them. All that said, if I had to pick a number 11, it would probably be Calgary, because again, the in-ring action was usually really good.
Just yesterday, I'm tooling around watching YouTube, right? Because I have a rich, full life. And I'm looking at YouTube and I'm going through my scroll recommended right at the top, and it says Calgary or Stampede Wrestling 1980, and it was posted by the TV station it was on.
Really?
So I click on this thing. First of all, it didn't look like the Hearts were involved at all. This is 1980. And on comes some announcers I never heard of, and they're outside of an arena, and limousines are pulling up, and here comes Sweet Daddy Siki. Right? I'm like, what? What am I looking at? And then here comes Bad News Allen and somebody else, some local guys I didn't recognize. And then the action starts, and inside the arena, there's maybe 175 people, tons of empty seats. And they showed the whole thing uncut, and the first person I saw was Mike Shaw, which makes sense, right? Who became, Maka Singh and whoever he was in WCW.
Norman the Lunatic.
Norman the Lunatic. Jeez. And then a bunch of Canadians I never heard of for the most part. So it makes me want to go back and research Calgary, or at least Stampede Wrestling, because I'm trying to figure out how many hands the promotion passed through, because this definitely wasn't the Hearts.
No, Bob, I've actually seen that. It's actually from 1985.
No. This was from 1980, and it was just posted.
The date they have listed is incorrect.
That's incorrect. Okay. All right.
And I mean, they had nothing to do with Stampede. It was, I have no idea why they used the Stampede name and logo, but I have no idea what's going on with that.
Interesting too, because like I said, they brought in people, at least a couple people I had heard of in Bad News Allen and people like that. So it was totally confusing me when I looked at. That's all I got to say. And I think it's well worth checking out because when you see the aging Canadian tag team that was taking on Siki and Allen, you go, who are these guys? So it's worth it as an oddity to look at. Would you agree with that, John, or no?
Oh, I think as an oddity, it was pretty cool to look at. I have to throw in my little Bad News Allen story. In 1979, I went to the matches in North Attleboro, Massachusetts, and I saw Bad News. He was called Bad News Allen Coage at that point, and he did a clean pinfall to Frank Williams.
Are you kidding?
I am not kidding. He had a really weird run in the old WWF. He was talked about on Championship Wrestling, or no, I don't think they mentioned his name on Championship Wrestling, but they talked about him on All-Star Wrestling being managed by Fred Blassie. I don't remember ever seeing him in the ring on TV, but I saw him live, and he again clean job to Frank Williams. It's very weird.
I think I remember that very early, very short stint he had. He must have been on his way out the door when Frankie got his win.
And he had hair. He had a big old afro.
Yes. Yeah. Yep. Different era. Ooh, great memory there. All right, let me shut up and get on to the rankings of our territories. And John, why don't you start since you're on a roll right here?
Okay. There were 9 promotions. I kind of went from 1976 to 1984, or the beginning of 1984. And there were 9 promotions that I really liked. And I actually had a tough time a little bit coming up with number 10, but we'll go with the AWA as number 10. I know they had good in-ring action. I know they had their fans, but I mean, it was the same guys over and over again. They brought in very little, they did not circulate talent the way that WWF did. They were similar, in my opinion, to the old Bruno Backlund WWF era, except that WWF actually rotated guys in and out of the territory. If you watch the WWF, let's say in June 1980, and then again in June 1981, they more or less had a completely different roster of stars. The jobbers remained the same, but the pushed acts were always different, aside from Bob Backlund and maybe one other babyface. So they didn't even have that. They kept recycling the same guys over and over again. The promotion definitely had its strong points, but it also had its weak points.
No, that's very interesting. I mean, one of the strong points I would think would be a heavy emphasis on Bobby Heenan as the kind of leader of the heel faction, the Heenan family, with Bockwinkel and Lanza and Duncombe as your perennial tag team champions feuding with the High Flyers. But I know what you're saying, John. It was very stagnant as far as just the same people there constantly. Yeah, they'd bring in like Lord Alfred Hayes or bring in someone here, someone there, but you're right. It was a lot of the same people over a long period of time. Bob, any other AWA thoughts?
Not yet. All I'm going to say is, boy, our list's going to be different.
Okay.
Between the three of us, I think our list is going to be wildly different.
Which is a nice, so very often our lists are very similar, so that's a good thing.
No, I can tell right off the bat, we're all going to have a whole different view of these things, which is great because you know what? It'll keep the list. Like I say, every time I compile these lists, they come out looking as accurate as anything I've found anywhere in terms of looking at history from these times. So I'm looking forward to seeing how this all shakes down.
Same here. One more shot I'd like to take at the AWA. People are very critical of the way the NWA booked Ric Flair as the heel champion who could never win a match. That's what the AWA did with Nick Bockwinkel. So that's just another shot.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I will give you guys my number 10. Apparently, there were more than one wrestling promotion that called themselves Big Time Wrestling, and this one is probably not the most famous one, but I went with the old Roy Shires promotion from San Francisco, probably Lou Kibbleman's favorite promotion. I put them number 10. They ran from the probably the early 60s to 1981 or so. And it was Roy Shires and Ray Stevens started the promotion together. And, you had a lot of talent there that eventually ended up in WWF. Guys like Pedro Morales, Don Morocco, the Samoans, Peter Maivia, Pat Patterson himself, Ray Stevens himself, Jimmy Snuka. Basically, all those guys would be play major roles in the WWF in the early 80s if they hadn't been there earlier. And it was really a good work rate territory. I mean, you had Stevens and Patterson at the top of the cards and lots of good quality matches, lots of good heels there. And I think Roy Shires was one of the great bookers of all time, but a real difficult guy to deal with. And I think he kind of burned himself out over time. And by the early 80s, he was ready to leave wrestling completely and the promotion went belly up. So that was it.
I have a question for you, Steve.
Please.
Because I'm completely... I can't think about this, but I'll put it this way. Did the Shire promotion promote anywhere else than the Cow Palace? Did they do other cities?
Yeah, they did. They did like Stockton, San Jose, Modesto. Yeah, those types of cities. I was going to say Bakersfield. That may have been too south, but they did a lot of cities there, and they had lots of success, and it was a great promotion for the workers because you're living in California where the weather's nice and that you're not traveling that far. It's kind of like almost like Florida where you're in a real nice weather area, but you're not traveling that far. So it was a neat place for the workers to work and enjoy the nice weather and all the beautiful women in California, I'm sure.
Nice period on your sentence, Steve. All right, is it my turn? I think this one is going to make you guys going, Bob, you don't know anything. But I'm sticking with this. My number 10. Again, I look at this big picture, what each promotion meant to the wrestling world as a whole.
Right.
My number 10 promotion is NWA Hollywood, the LaBelle promotion out of Los Angeles.
Oh, there's nothing wrong with that.
They did run other cities around California, and California is a big state, but I do believe that promotion, as corny as it could be, and how bad it was at the end of its run with the Frankenstein monster and all that stuff, and things like that. But in its prime, you had Mil Mascaras, Freddie Blassie, John Tolos, the entire, Black Gordman and Goliath. So many people that are like legendary names as we go on in time. And they drew like crazy. They were really popular. They were shown in New York up on that VHS station, right? Or
That's right.
UHF, excuse me, it was called back then. You had 52 or something it was. It was on in New York for years. I think its influence on other promotions, including the use of blood in matches, was very, very telling on what other promotions would do after that point. Because they saw how the magazines covered the Blassie Tolos feud, and everybody said, geez, we got to do that too. Especially after Blassie Tolos in 71 set an all-time California record for attendance in that outdoor stadium. So I think that in terms of its influence and in terms of its unique flavor, there was nothing other maybe than Bob Luce as wild as NWA Hollywood. And I rest my case on that one.
Yeah, the NWA Hollywood promotion, I mean, I'm a little bit familiar with the history. The thing is that by the time I started following wrestling in 1976, I mean, it had really gone downhill. I mean, and if you say Roddy Piper to me, the first thing that goes through my head is his feud with Chavo Guerrero in that promotion, 1976, 1977. So, but after that, it just started really taking water. And I remember the magazines started covering it a little bit more in 1980. And even as a kid, I'm like, this looks very minor league to me, Chavo Guerrero versus Victor Rivera in the main event. So that's why I didn't have them ranked. Now, based on what I've seen of the promotion, it was a fun promotion. But again, it was a little bit before my time.
Well, there you go. And I put it to you, too, just thinking in terms of history. In the 80s, what promotions didn't fade away? Right? There are no promotions that did not fade away. So I can't really hold it against them, although I think they were one of the earliest ones to close up shop in that decade.
Right. It really had nothing to do with, Vince McMahon's expansion. I mean, by the time the 70s were over, I mean, that promotion was very much in big trouble. So, that's... It's something, like I said, based on what little I've seen on VHS and on YouTube. It was enjoyable.
Yeah, but here's the thing too. I go looking for it and I see it listed and I watch and it's all that late stuff. And I'm like, that late stuff is like, it looked like there was literally 75 people at the once packed, Olympic auditorium, and it was really sad, to be honest. There is tape of the Frankenstein monster too, in case anybody wants a good laugh. All over YouTube. So
Yeah, well, Jules Strongbow, not the Indian Jules Strongbow, but the Los Angeles Jules Strongbow
right.
was the promoter there. And he did one of the funniest interviews ever. He was talking to Fred Blassie, and he's like, "So Fred, tell me about some of your problems. What are your problems?" And I was howling laughing at that crazy question. And Fred just kept a straight face and started talking about, what he was unhappy with in the wrestling business.
I'd love to see that interview.
Me too. I see the other one where he's bashing the female fans. You remember that one?
I don't. What happened?
Oh gosh, that interview.
Oh, wait, this is Blassie, not Strongbow.
Oh, well, so who asked who? Are you unhappy? What? I'm confused as to who said to who.
Jules Strongbow was interviewing Fred Blassie, and he said,
right.
and Jules Strongbow said, "So, what are some of your problems?" And I think maybe this was the interview where Fred Blassie said, that he was unhappy with the women in Southern California. I thought you meant Jules Strongbow was saying
no.
That'd be a heck of a thing
this
for
one
a
is
promoter
famous.
to say.
That interview is a famous one. I first saw by buying one of those Golden Age of Wrestling videotapes that were like $6 at Walmart, right? And I think the women here, well, they're just nothing but pigs, says Blassie, right? And Jules is like, no, don't go there. And it is a classic bit of Blassie verbose crassness.
Yes.
All right, John, number 9 for you, please.
Number 9 is a promotion that I actually like, and there is footage out there from the 70s, from the early 80s. It started going downhill right around 1984. You're going to hear that a couple of times from me today, but Portland Wrestling, Pacific Northwest Wrestling, we just had a show on Stick to Wrestling about their year of 1985, but I mean, Playboy Buddy Rose was always entertaining. They always had good matches. It was well booked, in my opinion, for the most part. Of course, they made some mistakes, but you got to see guys like, Gino Hernandez early in his career was there. Then as the 80s rolled on, Roddy Piper was there. He's first a heel and then turned babyface. You had the great, in my opinion, Roddy Piper and Rick Martel tag team. So, those are just some highlights. But Portland was a really good promotion until, like I said, right around 1984.
I totally agree, and I will just chime in that I will not talk about my number 9 because it's your number 9, John. It's Portland, for all the reasons you just said.
All right.
So you'll save us time putting Steve on the spot at number 9.
Well, I'm a Portland fan too, and I really enjoyed that one. My number 9 is similar to Bob's mention of the Hollywood promotion, the Los Angeles promotion, which really had its glory days in the early 70s. My number 9 had its glory days in the early 70s too. I'm going with the Big Time Wrestling, the Ed Farhat promotion in Detroit. I mean, anybody that read Brian Solomon's great book, Blood and Fire, I mean, that promotion was doing really well, huge box office in the early 70s to about the mid 70s, with the Sheik leading the way, with Bobo Brazil and all their stars that they had. And it did get repetitive over time. And by the mid 70s to the end of the decade, they were really drying up fast. But in that glory period in the early 70s, Sheik was selling out Maple Leaf Gardens, selling out Detroit Cobo Hall, and he was one of the top moneymakers in wrestling. He was a big star in LA too, and sadly that all ended for him around, the promotion died in 1980, but the legacy of the Sheik continues thanks to Brian's book and his foray into wrestling in Japan.
I think if I grew up in or around Detroit, there's no way I would have become a wrestling fan. I said that on my website many moons ago that I felt sorry for those people. They had to put up with Bill Lambier and that wrestling.
So I'm sorry. I'm an NBA guy. That was funny.
For those unaware, Bill Lambier was a basketball player for the Detroit Pistons, and as a Celtics fan, I see red whenever I just hear the guy's name.
Yeah, he was one of the bad boys of that era.
Okay.
He was a cheap shot artist, is what he was.
Oh, definitely. Mr. McAdam, number
Are
8.
we at number 8?
Already.
Okay. This promotion had a phenomenal prime. If we're just going to 1984 and we're stopping like January 1st, I would actually put them a little bit lower. But World Class Championship Wrestling had a phenomenal run in 1983 with the Freebirds against the Von Erichs. Now, again, what a great year. I mean, they were on in Boston the same time as the WWF, which is crazy. I mean, why have 2 wrestling shows on at the same time? But I stopped watching WWF. I only watched them when World Class was on commercial, and they just took that, they just took over, and I thought it was fantastic. Now, when the WWE Network first came out, I want to say like 12 years ago, I was very excited because they had, I believe, the entire year of 1982 World Class Championship Wrestling. I was very excited because it was a promotion, it was footage from a territory that I had literally never seen before. So I was like, this is going to be great. Maybe 5 or 6 episodes in, I was like, I can't do this anymore. They're not very good. Back in the, what was it? Not WWE Network, WWF 24/7, when that was on, they had Kevin Von Erich and Michael Hayes introducing episodes of World Class. And they came out about once every month or so. And they started when the Freebirds first came in as baby faces. And Michael Hayes, a couple of times, every time he was doing a 1982 episode, he'd basically tell the fans, look, it gets better. Don't tune out. It gets better. And it definitely did. They had a red hot 1983. So World Class gets number 8 for me.
Very good. Steve?
My number 8, I think John's going to find this controversial as he probably wants it higher, but I went with the Georgia promotion. The Georgia promotion had many great highs and lows from the 70s into the early 80s. I mean, they sold out the Omni many a time. Dusty Rhodes was a major player at the Omni, and we had guys like, Tommy Rich, obviously, Mr. Wrestling 2, Ole Anderson, T-Bolt Patterson. I mean, a huge array of stars in Georgia, and they got into the kind of the promotional rivalry with Vince in the early 80s, and then the Black Saturday thing happened, and Georgia wrestling lasted another 6 months to a year at best. But it was hard to put them in a spot, but I ended up at number 8 for them.
Yeah. We're brothers from a different mother, Steve, because that's exactly the same promotion I had at the same spot. And for younger listeners, all 3 of you, I want to emphasize there's a difference between Georgia Championship Wrestling and the Crocker promotion that took over the time slot on TBS. People tend to blur those 2 things together. They were 2 different promotions.
That's right.
This is the first of the 2 in that time slot.
Right.
But no, for all the reasons you just said, there's no reason for me to repeat you. I just think it's kind of underrated in terms of, Sully was your host, and virtually all the stars you just talked about were part of it. And the good thing about that promotion was the transient made it even better because you never knew what stars were coming in from other territories there.
Right.
And that's back during when guys would leave one, go to another, and somebody would run in and, what's Ernie Ladd doing here? That's how.
Right.
That's what kept it fresh. So I agree with you on that one. All right, Mr. McAdam, number 7.
Okay. I think there are going to be some people out there, perhaps even Steve and Bob, who are surprised that I have this promotion not rated even higher. My number 7 was the World Wrestling Federation. Yes, this is the promotion that I grew up on, watching every Saturday. Starting in 1981, I religiously went to the shows at the Boston Garden. Again, as I stated earlier, I like the fact that they had a steady rotation of stars. On the other hand, it was kind of slow moving. They did not do very many angles at all. They did maybe 3 angles a year during the Backlund era. And, like, it has its positives and it has its negatives. I could see someone ranking them even lower, but I have them. I have the WWF at number 7, and a lot of that really is nostalgic for me because I grew up with Bruno, I grew up with Backlund.
John, I wish you had been around during the 70s. And I'll just state this here. It was a lot wilder in the 70s as it was in the 80s. It really was. I mean, you'd have Jay Strongbow getting busted up every third week on TV, screaming and going wild. There were all kinds of brawls that would end shows and stuff like that. They toned it down considerably in the 80s, even though it still had elements of the 70s in it, at least until 82 or 83. So anyway, I just wish you'd seen more 70s, man, because it was really different then.
Well, I mean, I actually reviewed a show from 1975 on Stick to Wrestling, and the poor person that I did it with was like a younger person. She'd never seen this stuff before, and it was a Madison Square Garden show from March 1975, and it was so bad. I started watching in 1976, and if I had to, I could probably list every angle they did every year, and there were precious few of them. But then you know what? In a way, I get that that's like less is more. I've said this on Stick to Wrestling. I remember in October 1978 when Peter Maivia turned on Bob Backlund. I was watching in New York. It was the midnight show, and I literally couldn't get to sleep until like 4 or 5 in the morning because I was so pumped up. I had never seen a turn before, and to me, it came out of nowhere. So in a way, the less of that stuff you do, the more effective it is, but at the same time, they just didn't do enough to keep it entertaining, in my opinion.
And I give John props because if he went purely on sentimentality, he probably would have had WWF in his top 3, but he was really trying to do this authentically, so I give him props for that.
Growing up reading the magazines, I started getting them in 1976 and started reading about the other promotions, and I'm like, these other promotions seem a lot more entertaining than the wrestling I have, and at the end of the day, they kind of were.
I will once again reiterate, fans, our lists are going to be real different from each other. Real different. So, all right,
So
Steve Gennarelli, please, number 7.
So I went with the Mid-South promotion at number 7. Now, Mid-South, from the late 70s to the mid 80s was having tons of sellouts, and maybe not sellouts, but tons of huge gates at the Superdome in New Orleans, led by JYD. JYD, a huge draw there, and hopefully he'll be in the Observer Hall of Fame someday. But and as we know, as we get to the 80s, guys like Jim Duggan, Ted DiBiase, a huge roster of talent there, but JYD was the major player that they had. They had lots of great box office success, and it was one of the most hard-hitting promotions. Maybe they emphasized that aspect a little bit too much. Maybe it was too just all tough guys, and it seemed like that for a while, but it was a very believable, very good promotion, and I put them at number 7. Bill Watts, Mid-South.
Steve, I didn't need to show up today.
Hey, don't tell me your number 7 is Mid-South.
Yep.
Can't be.
Yeah. Swear to you.
We're eating the same foods, Bob.
We're eating the same food. So you like the Lytle brand cereal with the strawberries in it?
I guess so.
I just revealed to the world how cheap I am. All right, that's great. All right, John McAdam, number 6, please.
Number 6, I had the Memphis promotion. They were kind of, as far as star power goes, they didn't always have the top guys. Okay, you had Jerry Lawler anchoring the promotion, and then you had some lesser talents. It was a little bit like Portland in that Memphis was either the young guy who was on his way up, just getting started, or the older guy who the other promotions kind of didn't want. But Jerry Lawler, in my opinion, is the greatest talker in the history of the business, whether he's a heel or a babyface. As far as, I was talking about how the WWF, they just, didn't run very many angles. Memphis literally could run as many angles, more angles in a 90-minute show than the WWF did in a year. And in a way, that could be a negative because, at some point, when is this about the angles as opposed to being about the wrestling, and how many run-ins can you have in a 90-minute show? But pre-1984, I loved Memphis. I loved watching the Memphis wrestling from the 70s, as, there's not much out there. But then, like, I have most of it from 80, 81, 82, and it was a really good promotion. Plus, you had Jimmy Hart, who was in his prime, just one of the greatest managers of all time. Again, they could get a little bit excessive with the angles, but I always loved Memphis wrestling.
You had to, yeah. Steve-O.
All right. My number 6, John already mentioned them, World Class. In the late 70s, I think they were really struggling at times. It was kind of one of those promotions older wrestlers would go to die or to retire, and they weren't doing that well. But when the Von Erich boys started to come into the scene, and younger talent like Gino Hernandez and other younger talents came in, they really started to ride a wave of popularity, and they had a great production values on their TV. They had more cameras and more camera angles and really good production values on their shows. And it became a really hot item in that area. It was a very popular, highly rated show in that area. And in those feuds, like the Freebirds against the Von Erichs, were really revolutionary. And seeing the Freebirds get to be such big deals there, and they went to, I think they'd already been in Georgia, but they've been to other territories after that. And their run there, and the Von Erich against the Ric Flair feud was so big too. It was just a legendary promotion, a legendary time, and we know what happened to the boys, but they deserve to be acknowledged high, and I think number 6 is fairly high for World Class.
One negative about World Class, I remember reading in one of the After magazines in 1980, and first of all, you have Fritz Von Erich, Kevin Von Erich, David Von Erich, and Kerry Von Erich all wrestling in the same promotion all wrestling at the same time in the same promotion. To me, that seems really difficult to navigate. But again, in 1980, I'm reading that, the top heels in World Class were Stan Stasiak and Bulldog Brower. And I'm like, they felt ancient when they were in the WWF in 1979. I'm like, if these are the top guys, yikes. But they definitely World Class. I mean, I'm pointing out a severe negative, but there were a lot of positives there too.
Sure. Shoot, just in terms of how they promoted and how they presented the promotion, I thought was probably at its time as brilliant as what Vince McMahon did in a different way. I don't know if that makes any sense. The way they made the television look more major league, the way that, they used interspliced music and stuff like that before even McMahon did it. I just think that they were a brilliant promotion, just real smart at their height. That's all I have to say about that.
They were the first promotion that really turned their top baby faces, the Von Erichs, into almost rock stars. I mean, it was very different than the way the other promotions, the WWF has Bob Backlund, the Georgia has Mr. Wrestling 2, Florida has Dusty Rhodes, and World Class has these really athletic, good-looking guys at the top of the card. And it really, kind of, here's the blueprint other promotions, create and promote wrestlers like Kerry and Kevin Von Erich.
Absolutely. All right. My number 6, talked about earlier by Steve, was Big Time Wrestling Detroit. It just, at its height, it may have been, we're talking 71, 72, maybe, just for an eyelash. It might have been the top grossing promotion in the United States. I keep reading and researching that, and some people say yes, some people say no. All I know, it was right up there when it was at its height. You can argue about the quality of the cards, the quality of the television, all that, but Ed Farhart was a brilliant guy, and his place in the promotional history is rock solid, and I'll just leave it at that.
Fair enough.
All right, John, we're all the way up to number 5 already. I can't believe it.
Number 5, I went with Southeast Championship Wrestling. I started getting this on cable in 1980, and I couldn't believe how good it was. The angles all made sense. Everything was really well thought out. I'll give you one example. They had a match with Ole Anderson and Killer Carl Cox. Ole was the babyface. Ole, in the middle of the match, starts beating up the referee because he doesn't think the referee is being fair. And they go backstage and they're interviewing the referee. and he's all bloodied up. And he's like, I'm just trying to do my job out there. And this guy starts hitting me. And Killer Carl Cox comes out. And slowly but surely, you see that these two have a friendship. And it starts it starts unraveling. And you're like, wait a minute. This guy's really not officiating in a proper manner. That's just one example of, the brilliant booking I thought went on in Southeast. Now, of course, as time went on, it became a little bit more leaning towards run in. But there were times where this wrestling I thought was absolutely brilliant. They had the tag team of Dr. D. David Schultz and Phil Hickerson, who were amazing. And Jim Cornette came out and said, that's the best tag team I've ever seen outside of the Midnight Express. So, really good stuff. The only negative I have to say about them was it was kind of a minor league promotion with guys that wouldn't have been big stars anywhere else. But in a way that doesn't matter. They were over in the territory where they were working, and that's all that counts.
Well, John has introduced on Six Wrestling one of the we call him our Mid-Atlantic authority, but Todd Goss is this expert on wrestling, especially on the Jim Crockett promotion. And he and I were talking about this topic that we're doing today. I was curious to probe him and ask him what his top 10 was. And he actually listed Southeastern Continental as his number one promotion. So, you're in good company, John, with Todd agreeing with you.
All right.
He rated him even much higher than you did. But yeah, it's a promotion that's definitely majorly overlooked. I mean, they're not going to be on my list. I don't know if they're going to be on Bob's list, but they definitely did a lot on a shoestring budget.
Yeah, I mean, you can only rate what you saw. And when they came on in 1980, I mean, I had never heard of this promotion before because they got bare minimum coverage in the magazines. Even the Kaiser magazine, barely covered them. And I was just like, wow, this is quite the secret that's been kept from me.
No, I was a big fan of them right before they closed.
Mm-hmm.
In the early 90s, they were still running as Continental, and they had some wild angles, and Gordon Soley doing commentary along with Charlie Plath, and I thought it was great. I mean, and then it died one day, just like that. It seemed to just go out of business instantly. So those were the waning days, but they had a lot of talent. Like you said, John, a really storied history, and they deserve to be. They didn't make my list, but I'll be damn sure that I had them on my list when I was wheedling this down for sure.
They did an angle I thought was great. They had a tag team match where the loser was going to have his head shaved. And they had this guy, R.T. Tyler, who I thought was great. He was just a total Dusty Rhodes impersonation. But he was great. I loved him. And I forget who turned on him. I think it was the Matador, I think, who turned on him during this tag team match. And, so he's lost the match. He's got to get his head shaved. The promoter comes out and says, no, because you were turned on, you don't have to shave your head. And R.T. Tyler grabbed the razor and shaved his own head as the crowd screaming, no. It was such a great sight. And to me, that's like an ultimate babyface move. Like, no, I made a deal and I'm going to stick with it.
Well, now, was there ever an R.T. Tyler versus Dirty Rhodes match, John?
Dirty Rhodes, I'd forgotten about that.
Dirty Rhodes. Steve, number 5, please, sir.
All right. Now, John's already mentioned them, and I have a feeling Bob's going to be mentioning them. The way Bob and I are going, he's going to mention them in about 2 seconds. CWF Memphis is my number 5, and John already really put them over, but I will just add that in some ways they were kind of the precursor to what we'd end up seeing in the WWF in the 90s with all the crazy gimmicks, the Papa Shangos of the world. I mean, we even had Adam West as Batman make an appearance in Memphis in the late 70s. So, I mean, Memphis, anything could happen. Andy Kaufman could show up and wrestle. I mean, you could have anybody come in and of course, Dave Brown and Lance Russell, they made it seem so natural and normal. And they were kind of your favorite uncles to make it all seem worthwhile. And it was a really great show. So I have to mention that very highly at number 5.
Can't argue with that. I will be brief again with my number 5 because it's World Class Championship Wrestling, who I'll just put it this way. As somebody who liked to make money, if you go back to PWI and those magazines back when I was working there, we had Hogan was number 1, and on the cover number 2 had to be the Von Erichs, even before Flair.
Really?
They had Von Erichs on a lot of covers, man. It was like
Interesting.
because they were that popular. And thank you, Von Erichs, for all the bologna sandwiches back in the day. I appreciate it.
I remember in 1983, Sports Review Wrestling came out, and the Von Erichs were on the cover of an Apter magazine for the very first time. It was Kevin, David, and Kerry, and I was just like, wow, this promotion has really broken through.
Yeah, I do.
That was the first time.
Yeah.
I remember David having like a little bit of a cover on one of the like odd magazines in a match against Greg Valentine, but it was like, Bob, you understand this. You have like the big cover, and then you have like the major guys on the cover, and then you have like a picture in the corner.
Right.
Okay.
But most of the non-PWI ones would have a snipe picture. The snipe is the area on the top where there was a small headline with one little photo there. Then you'd have a main image, and sometimes you could squeeze in 2 smaller images all on the same cover. Ken Morgan, our art director, was a genius at putting 10 pounds of bologna in a 5-pound bag, if you know what I mean.
Yes.
So. All right, we're down to number 4. We're rocking and rolling. John, please.
Okay. In my top 4, on any given day, I could see myself ranking one of these promotions as number 1 because they were all that good. It's 1 through 4, 1 versus 4 is really close. My number 4 is Georgia. I grew up reading the magazines, looking at Georgia Championship Wrestling, and thinking, wow, this must be a fantastic promotion. It just seemed like it. And then the day came, October 3rd, 1981, where our cable company finally added WTBS. And I mean, I've said this on Stick to Wrestling before. Unless I really had something going on, like a baseball game or a show at the Boston Garden, I was not leaving the house until 8:05, until Georgia Championship Wrestling was over. They had so many stars, guys who came in because they wanted to have that showcase on WTBS. The matches themselves were always really good. I was used to the WWF where if you had a big-time heel like a Stan Hansen or a Don Morocco, it was like the guys they were fighting against, they wouldn't fight back. It was just they just sat there and took punishment. The Georgia matches looked like actual wrestling matches where both guys were trying to win. I loved the crowd at the WTBS studio. I know some people will say, oh, that's so minor league, but to me it was a lot of fun. It was almost like being at a high school basketball game. It had that kind of feeling to it. So it fell off probably right around the beginning of 1983 when they started bringing in guys like Killer Brooks to be like the top heel. It's like, what are you guys doing? But for the most part, Georgia, nothing but good memories for me.
Do you think, John, like looking back on all that success that they had, would you say that Ole Anderson was the major person to blame for the demise of Georgia Championship Wrestling?
I definitely would. I mean, sure. Ole in his own book would talk about how, he was cutting salary in order to, he was bringing in guys on the cheap as opposed to having the Freebirds on the show. He was having guys like Larry Zbyszko, who was talented but blackballed, couldn't get a job anywhere else. Killer Brooks, who, I see as a minor star. And it's like, I just want to say, Ole, it's not your revenues are not fixed, sir. If you have Paul Orndorff, Ivan Koloff, the Freebirds, etc., on the top of your show, more people will come to the Omni to see wrestling as opposed to seeing, Killer Brooks against Tommy Rich. Who wants to see that?
But I also think pissing off the Briscoes, who were shareholders, pissing off Barnett, who was technically one of the owners as well, that was a big part of the demise too, besides what you're saying, which is more about the day-to-day operation.
Oh, totally. I mean, again, in Ole's own book, he would talk about, how the stockholders were not getting any money. And he was like, yeah, I was trying to build a nest egg. And the stockholders were like, Ole, you need to give us dividends. And finally, one day, the Briscoes decided they just had it and sold to McMahon.
Right.
There you go. Steve, you can keep talking because it's time for number 4.
Wow, we're making some headway here. Number 4, I went with the aforementioned AWA, which John had earlier in the show. I mean, the AWA was one of those most successful territories of all the territories. Vern Gagne's payouts for the wrestlers were really, really strong. I mean, he's mentioned along with Mr. McMahon and Paul Bosch as one of the top payoff guys. And I guess working in the AWA territory wasn't that bad either. But I think, like John said, I mean, from a fan standpoint, got a little stale at times, not enough turnover. I mean, the high flyers were your underrated tag team striving to win the gold from like the mid 70s to the 80s, and it had a lot of great talent, a lot of veteran talent, but I think, like John said, it just didn't have enough new faces to keep it fresh and interesting.
One thing I want to throw in about the High Flyers, too, they were a great tag team. I would say they were like 95% as good as the Rock and Roll Express, and that's a compliment. But at the same time, they were the top tag team, the top babyface tag team for literally 10 years. And, I mean, come on, you got to mix it up a little bit.
Right.
74 through 83.
There you go. All right, my number 4 is the aforementioned CWA, USWA, Memphis, whatever they called it. Just on a personal note, I do continue to this day believe that in 1991, when I stood next to Jerry Lawler and Dave Brown in Channel 5 in Memphis, I had made it in wrestling. That's when honestly, that's when I thought, well, you did it, man. You're part of the scene. I'd done a lot before that, but nothing thrilled me as much as hanging out there. It was just an unbelievable thing. That hard-hitting Memphis action, even on the Saturday morning show, the history that it had going back to, to the older promotions with Goulas and everything like that. It's just, to me, Memphis wrestling, I still consider that, and a lot of people argue with me, and I don't care. Just as a personal note, I consider the Memphis Studio Wrestling Show to be the best weekly television series of all time involving pro wrestling. That's just my opinion. Others may have other things to say, but for me, it hit all the right notes every time I watched it, and I still wish it was around today. That's it.
Amen.
You know what? For the longest time, I thought Memphis was going to be around forever, and I do mean that literally. I mean, they did great ratings on Channel 5, even when, I'm not saying the early 90s were as good as the early 80s, but it was still one of their top rated television shows. And I would tell people as late as 1994, 1995, as long as they have that time slot, they will be around forever. And they lost the time slot eventually.
The passage of time, the passage of talent, the changing eras, the let's keep with the Joneses mindset that every wrestling promotion had once the 90s set in. A lot of things contributed to the death of Memphis wrestling, but they really were the last of the Mohegans. They were just, they hung on and hung on and hung on. And I think they promoted to what, 95? And then some other people came in and stayed on Channel 5 for even longer under a different promotional name. That's stick-to-itiveness, man. I just, I give them all credit. I don't know what to say other than I enjoyed it as much as anything I've ever enjoyed in my wrestling life. We'll put it that way.
I mean, look at it this way. Just recently, we're recording on Sunday, and this happened on Wednesday. Smoky Mountain Wrestling had their final wrestling show. And you think about it, Memphis lasted longer than Smoky Mountain. I mean, it was out there for a long, long time. I personally knew wrestlers who would go out there. They would save money, go out there and get exposure, because that's the only way they were going to get on television. And without naming names, a whole bunch of them went on to have pretty decent careers.
When I was there in 91, who was on the roster passing through? Ed Farhat had put Rob Van Dam and Sabu there.
Yes.
I mean, I got to meet and talk to those guys when they were weaved tadpoles, man. It was like, I was really lucky. That's all I have to say. Just from a pure fan standpoint, I was so lucky.
I was lucky too. I got to go and visit the studio in 1988. Not just visit the studio, attend a taping, and then I got to go to the Mid-South Coliseum to see a live event. So I mean, I'm glad I got to do that. Bucket list.
Yeah, it's true. I always forget to mention this. I did go back 2 or 3. When did I go back? I think it was the year I met my wife, and we went back to I was playing on Beale Street. My band was playing opening
Nice.
for Coco Taylor at BB King's Club, and while I was in town, I phoned Jerry Lawler, whose number I still had. I said, "Can I come visit?" He said, "Sure." So on Saturday morning, I went out to the thing, and he put me he put me in the crowd. Was Stacey Carter. I didn't get interviewed on the show, and she's all over me, and like Tommy Rich is in the ring going, "Is that your boyfriend out there?" I'll never forget it. It was so good, but, no, Memphis. I'll put it this way, when I visited Memphis and hung out there for a week amongst Jerry Lawler being so accommodating and everybody else being so cool, I felt like I was home. I mean, I don't know how else to put it. There was no airs. Back then they had Eddie Marlin and, they had Jeff Jarrett to talk to and Robert Fuller. Forget it. I'm gonna talk all night. Shut me up. Get me. I'm sorry, I'll fanboy right here. I don't care. To me, it was the best thing I was watching in that era. Shoot, I had Matilda the Bulldog or I had Robert Fuller. Which would you rather watch?
Robert Fuller.
That's all I have to say. That's it. John, please shut me up. Number 3, please.
Number 3, and again, this one could easily be number 1, is Jim Crockett Promotions / Mid-Atlantic Championship Wrestling. I grew up reading about this promotion in the magazines. They had so many big stars. It looked like, we're talking, Ric Flair, Ricky Steamboat, Paul Jones, Blackjack Mulligan, Wahoo McDaniel, the Andersons in the 70s. And then in the 80s, they started bringing in guys like Roddy Piper, and Greg Valentine was there in the 70s too. They didn't have a ton of turnover, but they kept things interesting. They did interesting angles. They had great matchups. I mean, finally, when they came on cable in 1985, it was, just the greatest thing ever.
Oh.
And I would go out of my way. I would travel to places like Philadelphia and Baltimore just to see this promotion. So they're my number 3. And like I said, they could be my number 1.
I will just chime in here to save us time by saying that's my number 3 as well.
Okay.
And I'm very similar to you because I had moved from Ulster County, New York into Westchester County, got a new cable system. I think it was around 85 too. And I saw my first TBS then too. And it was like being let out of jail, wasn't it? My gosh. No, seriously, to see that show that I had heard about and read about for years, finally to see it live was like, I can't miss this. Thank goodness I had a VCR. That's all I have to say. All right, Steve, you're number 3, please.
All right. Well, I live in Tampa, Florida, and I actually am picking the Florida promotion. And it's probably more to how they produced it in the 70s during the Eddie Graham heyday. I mean, everybody and their brother wrestled in Florida in the 70s. Dusty Rhodes is a great feud against superstar Billy Graham, which they brought to New York. But they had every major heel, guys like King Curtis, Cyclone Negro. I mean, there's tons of famous talent wrestled here. And then in the 80s, I didn't really care for all the Kevin Sullivan stuff. I think that kind of like jumped the shark in some ways. But to think about the 70s, the Jack Briscoe era, Jack Briscoe went from being one of the top Florida wrestlers to becoming the premier NWA world champion. Definitely elevated the sport. And that's why I give them the number 3 spot between Dusty's great babyface run, Jack Briscoe's great NWA run, and all the great heels like superstar Billy Graham.
There you go. Very good. My gosh, how quick we got to number 2. I'm so happy.
Bob,
John
what was your number
McAdam.
3?
What's that?
What was your number 3?
Oh, I'm sorry. It was the same as yours. Jim Crockett Promotions.
Okay.
That's why I'm sorry I cut myself off. Yes, I'm not going to go on because your reasons were the same as my reasons. I should have said that when I was talking earlier, fans. My number 3 is also Jim Crockett Promotions. They did everything right except making Dusty the Booker so often. Other than that, it was like, come on. Who doesn't have fond memories of that 605 show, man? I can't even imagine that not being in virtually everybody's top 3.
And, Dusty really was great as a booker in 1985 and 1986. And then as 1987, as every booker does every booker has a shelf life, and Dusty kind of crashed and burned, I would say, like spring 87, and Jim Crockett, just never could get off the Dusty train. Even after the promotion had been sold to WTBS, he would write letters urging them to reconsider making Dusty Rhodes their booker. I mean, Jim Crockett was, and finally in the 90s, he just realized what a big mistake that was.
Yeah, Triple H is 1987 Dusty right now as booker of WWE.
Oh.
Ouch.
I have to confess, I have not watched WWE in a long time.
Oh, my friend, I watched every frame of the Survivor Series, what's left of it. I will say, since I haven't mentioned it, it tells you everything you need to know. So there you go.
Okay.
John, how about your number 2?
My number 2 could easily be number 1, but the NWA champion did not go through this territory, and they created stars as opposed to bringing in stars, which, kind of gives it away. It's Mid-South Wrestling. I mean, I got it on cable for a little while in 1980. The booking was brilliant. It was a lot like Southeast, except you kind of bought these guys more as stars. You had Ted DiBiase, Paul Orndorff, Junkyard Dog, the Freebirds, etc. They would get guys over like the Grappler. When he was in Mid-South, I bought him as a big star, and not knowing how wrestling went, I couldn't understand why in 1983 he's part of a tag team and not a major contender for, the Southwest Heavyweight Championship. The booking was brilliant. I'll give you one example. They had a guy named Ken Mantell who, after he would defeat his opponents, would cut their hair. He would say, I brand my opponents just like I brand cattle. Well, he cuts Paul Orndorff's hair and, kind of cheap shots Orndorff after a loss. And that sets up, that feud. Paul Orndorff decides he's going to bring this hair cream in, and that's how he's going to counter Ken Mantell. Like, I'll take your hair off with this chemical. Well, Michael Hayes gets on TV, and all of a sudden he's got this hair cream. He's like, yeah, I borrowed it from Paul Orndorff, which is just the most dirtbaggy thing a person could possibly say. I stole this from your gym bag? No, I borrowed it. And that led to the whole Junkyard Dog blinding. So it was really good episodic television. They had all kinds of angles going on just like that. And it didn't last long. It was off my cable system pretty quickly, but I loved it, and it's available on Peacock. I mean, 82 was great. 83, they were a little bit down, but you want to check out 1984. Just great wrestling, great booking, etc.
There you go. Steve-O.
Well, my number 2 was Jim Crockett Promotions. Thinking about the 70s, I think by the mid-70s, George Scott came in as the booker, and they really got this, as John said earlier, a whole army of a great roster of talent. The Blackjack Mulligan. I mean, before and some people like Todd Goss, our friend, has said the heyday of Wahoo McDaniel against Johnny Valentine, that may have been the peak of the promotion. I mean, Todd felt that way. But seeing young Ric Flair come up, young Greg Valentine come up, guys like Paul Jones, Wahoo again. I mean, just a great talent. And then we know about the 80s run with Dusty as the booker and the Starrcade era wrestling. That was really, really big. So you have to, give them their due. They were very professional and huge box office, lots of great success. So Jim Crockett would be my number 2.
Very good. This is why I said. Well, this is why I said our lists are going to be very, very different. And I tended to weigh mine again on the influences on the entire sport, as well as its, shall we say, artistic or match quality. My number 2 is the AWA.
Okay.
Here's why. Number 1, they in their prime. They started around 1960. They were way bigger than people gave them credit for. Way bigger. Not just Minnesota. It was Chicago, Wisconsin, Colorado, Utah, Nevada, California, and Nebraska. They had working agreements with other people like Houston and Memphis and people like that. They always had working agreements going around the wrestling world. Their influence was felt all over the country. And I agree, it fizzled. Yeah, we all know it fizzled, but go back to the 70s. Go back to the early 80s. I thought the quality of the wrestling was always great. Nobody talks about Billy Robinson anymore. Nobody talks about a lot of the stars they had anymore because, nobody ever saw them and people are getting old. I did have a chance to see a lot of those people, and I thought, you know what? My number 1 and number 2, a lot of people are gonna say, "Oh, they were boring back in the day." I wasn't bored. That's all I'm gonna say. It weighs on me. I wasn't
Yeah,
bored. I thought the boring part made it look more like a sport.
right.
You know what I'm
That
saying?
makes sense.
If constant craziness isn't going on, here comes the guy stabbing another guy with a Coke bottle, right? That's what federation, what sports league would allow that? The fact
Right.
that things never got that crazy a lot made it more realistic in a way. So I am putting my freak flag up and making the AWA number 2, and that's all before ESPN. You can cut that point off after that point. I
Right.
don't care about
Okay.
that point. I am
Okay.
talking about their prime when for a few minutes they may have been the highest grossing wrestling company in the United States.
Yeah.
There's
They
no
even had
they,
Hogan.
yeah, well, no, even way before that. I'm talking about like
Hmm.
70s into the earliest part of the 80s. They were all over the country. I think
Hmm.
they had a wider span than any other promotion. I'll leave it at
They
that.
definitely did.
I'll leave it at that.
Okay. Well, my
Yeah.
number 1 and, my number 1 and my number 2, it's like Bob was saying, you know, to me, you look at this wrestling and you're like, "Is this real?" It might be real because it was so they weren't smashing bottles across guys' heads. It was everything was very looked very legitimate, and you could turn off your brain and be like, "Okay, this is a real sport." My number 1, and the only reason I have this number 1, the tiebreaker is because the NWA champion frequently appeared on Championship Wrestling from Florida. Now, after 1983, maybe late 82, the promotion fell way off. And by the time it was 1984, 1985, 1986, it was a bad promotion. But before that, it was a great promotion. It looked, the angles and storylines were all outstanding. It looked logical. It felt like a real sport. The television was always interesting. It was something they had stars, and Eddie Graham was able to make stars. And if you read about it in the magazines, it looked fantastic. And then when I finally started getting it on cable, it was even better. I loved it. Championship Wrestling from Florida, pre 1983. They're my number 1.
Wow. Knocked me down with a feather.
That's a good pick.
Steve?
My number 1 was, I'm sure it's going to shock a lot of people, the World Wrestling Federation. I guess, yeah, shocking, I know. Um, but I think if I can say just like one thing about them that was better than the rest, I think they did a great job conveying that the title, the world title, meant more than anything else. Bruno held it with so much integrity, and by the time Backlund got it, the title was so important. Even in his era, it just remained that way. I think while Backlund wasn't as good of a champion as Bruno, I mean, I think because the title was so respected amongst the fans in our territory, people wanted to come out and see the title get defended, and people wanted to see those championship matches. And so I think that was the thing that really carried a lot of my vote as far as just popularity of the championship, popularity of the champion, and great opponents as well. And plus, you got to give those 3 heel managers all the credit in the world for bringing in their great challengers. And we had a lot of great challengers there along the way, but Blassie, Albano, and Wizard always did their part in keeping them hot heels.
My number 1 is WWF, Capital Wrestling Corporation, Barry McAllister Cluna, Phil Zacco. I mean, please. No,
You gotta love it. You
no,
gotta love it.
no, it's hard to take somebody to the dance in your senior year when you loved them in your junior year, right? You love the girl that's in the junior year, you didn't want anybody else in your senior year. I just think that, yeah, it's the first thing I ever really, really, really got into, even after the Cleveland promotion I saw in the 70s. Their influence was really wide, and, the beauty part about, let's say, 70s into the 80s in the World Wrestling Federation is you did get to see people from other areas like Dusty Rhodes and Harley Race and Ric Flair, and they would, even Greg Gagne, Vern Gagne, they would all come to the Garden right, Steve? And periodically, they would all be there. And it just felt like it was the most important. I don't know if it's because they had better television coverage, particularly into the HBO years, the early HBO and things like that. To me, it just seemed like the major league. The fact that they even ran Madison Square Garden made it like bigger than life in my eyes. And one of my biggest thrills as a fan was finally going to MSG at the first time. I finally got to go in the late 70s. So I don't know. They're what brought me to the dance. I think they measure up to all the other number ones here. Or even those. I understand John's pick, and it's hard to argue with John's pick. If you're looking for quality and hot action, Florida was it. I mean, it was just it. And you and I, Steve, grew up with WWF, and I guess John did too. It was just hard for me not to vote for it, so I put it in. Forgive me, hardcore fans out there. Just forgive me.
Hey, if it's your favorite, it's your favorite.
Yeah. I have a couple other promotions here I'd like to mention, if it's okay with you guys.
Please.
The long-running World Wrestling Association at Indianapolis. I mean, nobody talked about it. And nobody talks about it now, but they were successful for a long, the Sam Menaker days and all that stuff. They were a big deal back in the day. The Blackjacks, Bobby Heenan, and Andre the Giant, and Ernie Ladd, and Bobby Heenan's first real stardom as a manager was there, not the AWA. It was there. I don't know what to say other than it gets a lot of short shrift because nobody ever saw it. Nobody ever covered it. Back in the day they did because Heenan would get busted open and make for great photos for the covers of magazines, right, Steve? I mean, he was Wrestling Magazine Gold in the mid-70s, but I just want to give them a shout out. And I want to give Central States a shout out, right?
Okay.
For Bruce Brody.
Yeah. I mean, known for years as the Bob Geigel. I mean, Harley Race was, I guess, part owner for a while.
He was.
Yeah. I mean, Bulldog Bob Brown, everybody knows that period. Bulldog Brown, Bob Sweetan, and Roger Kirby, and Rufus R. Freight Train Jones, and people like that. But in the St. Louis Wrestling Club, same way.
Right.
I mean, that legendary, just that legendary monthly show that they would run. I want to give Houston Wrestling with Paul Bosch a shout out. I mean,
I was going to mention, Bob, and I'm sorry to cut you off there. I was just going to say that there were some great wrestling cities, not so much promotions, but more like cities, like your Torontos, your St. Louis's, your Houstons, that were as good as any in the world, but they weren't really like promotions. And
well, that's the thing. Yeah.
So
can't call it promotion if they only run or a territory, that is, if they only run one city.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's what today's NWA does. They take a gas station in Texas where a bunch of guys went out and bought their own championship belts, and they run it at the filling station, and they call that a territory? Huh?
Well,
let me just say this one more time. If Tony Khan is a money mark, Billy Corgan is a money order mark. I rest my case. It's just it's sad. Go ahead, John. I'm sorry.
No, I was going to say about 8 years ago, we started Stick to Wrestling. I believe it was episode number 3 or 4. I actually, now I'm pretty sure it's 4. The show is titled "The Territories Are Dead and They're Never Coming Back." Right?
Right.
I invite you to listen to that show because, there are still people who somehow think the territories will someday return, and they're not. Just the structure for what was once the territories is completely gone. I just want to share this story too. I was at a convention in 1988, and we were all seated listening to Lou Thez talk. And Lou's like, "Oh yeah, the territories are coming back. This what McMahon's doing is not sustainable." And he's done, and we're all kind of looking at each other like the territories are dead. And it was like a magic trick. Lou Thez comes up to our table, and he's like, "Hey guys, sorry to say that about the territories. I just wanted to say what was going to make people happy." It's like he knew what we were going to say.
Yeah. One more shout out. Smoky Mountain. I loved every episode I watched. To me, it was the tonic for the homogenized WWE of the time. I loved Smoky Mountain, never missed it. We just lost Bob Caudle. It was an oasis during my wrestling week to get those tapes out of Atlanta to watch Smoky Mountain every week. It was great. And again, the only reason it's not here, they just didn't have the legs. It wasn't around long enough. A wonderful, I wouldn't call it a failed experiment, but I would say that it was an oasis in its time.
It definitely was. I looked forward to getting that Smoky Mountain wrestling tape from a gentleman in Johnson City, Tennessee every 4 weeks. I did not think Smoky Mountain Wrestling was eligible because it was a 90s territory.
No, that's true. You're right. But I wanted to shout him out anyway. Yeah.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, I mean, twice I flew out from Boston to see Smoky Mountain Wrestling. I did it in 94 and I did it in 95. I loved that promotion. They would have been probably my number 5 or number 6.
Yeah. I am still surprised at your number 1, John. I just think it was, well, you're looking at it in terms of overall promotional quality. Am I reading that right?
You are, absolutely. And Florida was a successful territory. I wanted to throw this in too. A lot of guys appeared in Florida for a week. What they would do is they would take their family on vacation in Florida, and the guy would just go wrestle at night, and he'd be able to write off the vacation. I mean, Hulk Hogan did it once in 1981.
It sounds about right. And one more editorial comment I want to make. I just wish, and I think this taints every opinion everywhere in America now, in terms of wrestling promotions. They only know what they see or have seen and have seen on YouTube, and they have no access to the stuff where there's no tape. There's a million great wrestling moments that aren't on any sort of videotape, and they get forgotten by the passage of time. And I think it's sad. This is why I love the wrestling history books everybody's writing these days, because you can finally get a feel for stuff you haven't seen with your own eyes.
I mean, I've said this on Stick to Wrestling, and I've actually said it on a couple of different podcasts. I went to the Boston Garden in 1982, and I saw Bob Backlund against Bob Orton Jr. in an incredible match. And then about a year later, I saw Bob Backlund against Ivan Koloff in an incredible match, and it's gone. I know this footage does not exist. There was no television. And in a way, in more than a way, that stinks. But in another way, it kind of adds to the legacy of it. Like, okay, if you were there, you saw it. If you weren't there, it's gone and it's never coming back. And guess what? Probably a lot of people probably the majority of people who were there are no longer with us.
I wanted to add that I know something that Brian Last and Jim Cornette talked about on one of their recent shows is that, occasionally there's people find things like in the States, and there was a rumor that they were discussing that when Fred Blassie died, apparently he had a lot of archives, and he supposedly had, I don't know if it's true or not, but they thought he had reels of the footage of him against Tolos from the LA Coliseum, the famous match. And it maybe even has the angle on tape too, but those were all like old movie films. And again, we don't know if those old things are salvageable or if they're playable. They may not be, but there's always hope that maybe a collection or something. And WWE apparently owns Blassie's stuff now. Maybe they'll do the research. Maybe they'll find out if it's usable or not. And maybe they'll see the light of day someday. Who knows?
I'd love that. I say this all the time. I mean, the people who were there and would appreciate something like that, they are now old and gray if they're even still around. Mm-hmm. So that's why I want so badly for WWE to release whatever they have, let's say, on the 1976 Shea Stadium show, because I was a little kid when that happened. And, now I'm 60 and, I am the person who would appreciate that, not a younger person.
Fred Blassie's, I know that WWE has gobs of video they don't touch. And I know this because every time they put a package together when somebody dies, they show highlights from old matches, but you don't see those old matches re-released anywhere on any of their forums, not their websites or what, their old website or any of this. It's already there. I'm dying to see tape of Fred Blassie from 72 and 73. They just don't put it out there. And I don't understand why they don't release every little thing they can. I don't know if it's finances. Well, if they have more money than anybody in the world now, I don't know why they wouldn't release it one way or another, because everything is a cash cow. Even when you release stuff to YouTube, you can make money on it. You know that, right? I mean, if you have a popular YouTube program, if you get enough people, you start to get paid. I know people personally who have this one guy that reviews products, and he gets 2 million hits a week. He gets paid for that after that point. So I don't know why they don't release every frame of everything they have, but I can't answer for a business model. I just can't.
I do know this, that they, from the moment WWE Network became a thing, they monitored what people were watching, and one person who worked there says, and I'm quoting, "No one watches that old shit." And it's sad, and I know a lot of people just knee-jerked and said, "Yes, they do." The numbers don't lie, kids. It's just not a popular consumer product. But I am still on Bob's side. It would take minimal effort and minimum, investment to release that stuff. Just be good people and do it, man.
I wish. I'm never going to see it, but I wish.
Yeah.
It's like a little kid on Christmas. Am I going to get that, am I going to get that racing car set? You just don't know until the day arrives. So,
and one good thing too is a few times a year they will release something, and it's almost like Christmas. Hey, they release an Omni show from 1983. Something like that.
Yeah. It's conceivable, but we'll see what happens in the future. All I know is I was shocked when I saw pictures of the Albany-based International Pro Wrestling Hall of Fame, and Triple H was there last week.
Mm-hmm.
He was there. They were running that house, so a lot of the wrestlers came up and they did little vignettes up there and stuff like that. So I'm thinking, if anybody they should talk to is a place like them who could curate that type of a project.
Yes.
Because they're part of history. They're looking back at history. You can only hope, right, that somebody goes, "Hey, that's a great idea." Then the wheels get rolling. Next thing you know, I'm watching Joe Turco against, the Black Demon. So who knows what could happen? Guys, it's such an honor and pleasure to have you on my show. I really appreciate every time you guys take part in this. I really do. This is a Christmas present for me early, because it's like, you guys, like I said, you're pretty much the gold standard out there, and to develop friendships with both of you, it means more than all that. So thank you for being here again. It's good to see you.
I always have a good time. I always have a great time hanging out with you guys and talking wrestling. So it's my pleasure.
All right, John, since you're talking, hype us, tell us where we all can find you, or in case there's one listener out there who doesn't know about your podcast or anything else you got going on, feel free.
Well, if you like Steve and I here, you will like us on Stick to Wrestling. Steve is the frequent co-host of Stick to Wrestling, not every single week, but I think more than 50% of them. This last week, we talked about Portland wrestling in 1985, and it was a good episode. If you listen to it, we had Frank Culbertson on. He grew up on Portland the way I grew up on WWF, and he had a lot of interesting things to say. Every month, we review the WWF from 40 years ago. So pretty soon, Steve and I will be recording a show about the WWF from December 1985. And we have all kinds of good stuff we talked about. If you have not heard it, just go to Google, put in, Stick to Wrestling, and sample an episode. I am confident you will enjoy it.
I can vouch for that. Steve, what's on your plate these days?
Well, I will add that you can go to McAdamPod.com and you can access any of the episodes. Sean Goodwin, a great guy who did the first 100+ episodes with John. John did a lot of episodes solo after that, and then him and I have been doing a lot of them together after that, but they're all good episodes. Anything related to wrestling, if you like, because we've covered so many different topics, there's got to be something there for anybody to enjoy.
And you know what? I actually, there's like 2 or 3 shows that I flew solo on. Usually, I always have a guest, almost always have a guest. And if there's one thing I think I've been really good at is picking guests.
Oh, yes.
I've struck out like 2 or 3 times, which is a pretty good batting average considering that we've had 388 episodes.
Pretty good. So I have to assume the fact that I've never been asked back is a sign that my show went right into the toilet, swirling into the Thames. What's going on?
That is false. That is
You've been on-
completely false.
You've been on multiple times, Bob.
I have?
Yes.
Oh, I was on twice. That's right. Once alone and once with you, both of you guys. So,
Mm-hmm.
and I consider it another highlight of my wrestling career.
Well, third highlight's coming up.
Oh, yeah, I begged hard enough. That's good. Okay.
No, we always enjoy you on the show.
Oh, thanks, man. Anyway, here they are. You love them. It's John McAdam and Steve Gennarelli of Stick to Wrestling on Arcadian Vanguard. You can find it anywhere finer podcasts are purveyed. Guys, if I don't talk to you again, happy holidays. I hope everything is going, well, and continued success into 2026, please.
Thank you very much. And then same for you, Bob.
So now that we've compiled all these territory favorites, we're now going to rank them point-wise based on a 1 to 10 ranking system. And because I'm 117 years old, possibility of error is plus or minus 100%. Here are our choices for our 10 favorite wrestling territories from our wrestling lifetimes. We hope you enjoy this. Here's our top 10. Tied for 9th. Southeast Championship Wrestling / Continental and Big Time Wrestling in Detroit and Toronto. Number 8, Georgia Championship Wrestling. Number 7, World Class Championship Wrestling. Number 6, Mid-South / UWF. A three-way tie at 3rd, the AWA Championship Wrestling from Florida, and the CWA / USWA Memphis territory. Number 2, the World Wrestling Federation. And number 1, Jim Crockett Promotions. Attention, Gen Xers. If you'd like to explore the era that appeals to you, look no further than GenerationXWire.com. The generation who grew up with elite in entertainment, music, movies, TV, books, pro wrestling, and more finally has a one-stop destination for all their Gen X needs. From Aerosmith to Batman to the Killer Bees to the Twilight Zone, there's something for everybody at GenerationXWire.com. You won't find a more eclectic mix of pop culture content than at the leading website that specializes in the greatest generation, GenerationXWire.com. Check it out today. Well, another one's in the books. Thank you all for listening. Another one of our list shows with the great Steve Gennarelli and John McAdam. They are the highest rated shows we've done so far. I think people like to listen to what we come up with and then leave comments on social media, and we invite you to do that, especially on Facebook. Leave your comments, say we're a bunch of jackasses, say we nailed it, whatever you want to say. We love hearing from you. Write to us. Email address is outdatedwrestling@gmail.com. Our website is outdatedwrestlinghour.buzzsprout.com, where you can hear all of our shows. Find out about the Outdated Wrestling Hour fan club, or for a nominal fee, you can help perpetuate the ongoing adventures of this show and our sister monthly podcast, the Outdated Entertainment Hour. And the current Entertainment Hour, it's old magazines from Argosy to Inside Sports. You might find something you used to read back in the day, so give it a listen. We think you would enjoy it. And our guests on that one, again, are Steve Gennarelli and Brian R. Solomon. Find me on Facebook. I'm the only Bob Smith that's singing with B.B. King, which I did 10 times as I recall. It may have been more than that, but I recall 10 times doing that. It was wonderful. I was a blues guy known as Robert Charles, and Robert Charles music, and it's spelled Charles, is available at YouTube Music, Spotify, and Amazon. And I think it's mostly free, so if you want to hear some of my stuff, go ahead and look for it. The album Metropolitan Blues, the greatest thing I have ever done. We're also at all the other social medias, and a lot of them I'm outdated _Bob. Underscore is a thing, not a word. And I'm on most of the other ones, Blue Sky and Threads and X, you name it. I'm on most of them. That's it for now. I want to get out of here because we had a long show this time, and we thank you for listening. Please come back next Friday and every Friday thereafter. I'm Bob Smith. I used to be with Pro Wrestling Illustrated back when the magazines meant a lot. Yeah, I miss those days greatly. So until next time, in the words of Ringo Starr, peace and love, brothers and sisters. Peace and love.